What's up everybody, it's Man of Low Moral Fiber here. My name's Luke, and I've made a video demonstrating the difference between 60 frames per second and 30 frames per second in Borderlands 2. However, YouTube does not traditionally support 60 frames per second, so you will need the HTML5 player to make this work. And I'm going to explain why real quick. First, I recorded a video at 60 frames per second. I then took that clip into Sony Vegas and I adjusted the playback rate so that the video would only play back at half speed, and then I stretched the video out. Then I adjusted the undersampling rate so that one track would be at 30 frames per second and the other one would be at 15 frames per second, though they were both playing back at half speed. So then when you doubled the playback speed using the HTML5 player, you'd be getting 60 frames per second on one track and 30 frames per second on the other track. And that's pretty handy. To get the HTML5 player, you need to go to youtube.com/html5 and request the HTML5 player. Once you have done so, please come back to this video and adjust the playback rate, or the playback speed rather, to be at 2 and the quality to be at 1080p for best effect. You will need to use Chrome to get 1080p in the HTML5 player, as the Firefox HTML5 player currently does not support 1080p. Come back when you've adjusted that and go ahead and view the rest of this video.
Alright, so hopefully you enabled the HTML5 player and doubled playback speed of the video so that you will not be viewing it in slow motion. You could, however, use a slower playback rate in order to very easily see what is going on. When viewed properly though, at double playback rate, 1/4 of the video will be displaying at 60 frames per second, and another quadrant will only be displaying at 30 frames per second. I've purposely left the two quadrants of the video unlabeled at the moment, but they will become labeled once we get about halfway through this quest. Obviously, the more frames per second you have, the less time occurs between each frame per second, or each frame, I should say. Frames per second is a measure of still images per every second of video or gameplay. Because there is less time between each frame, if you have a higher frame rate or FPS, motion will actually appear more fluid, and because of that, gameplay more smooth. So now, after we get a little bit closer to this guy, the labels will appear, and we can see that the top left portion is playing back at 60 frames per second, with the bottom right portion playing back at 30 frames per second. Obviously, the 60 FPS portion appears much more smooth, especially when I am turning or running quickly. When I get down these stairs after killing these guys and find the Torg Architect, I strafe around him a few times, and it's very easy to see the difference in FPS in that situation. So we're gonna go ahead and get down to that guy. I know it's kinda hard to concentrate and focus on both of these video feeds with this particular layout, but people had requested this layout, when I had done my last video on the subject. I definitely wanted to bring a layout like this to you guys. We do, however, have 2 layouts coming up after this, which may be more appropriate for your particular taste. I'm gonna go ahead and finish this guy off here and show you my gear and skill build like I do at the end of most of my videos. Obviously, this is just a melee 0 build at overpower level 8, and I do a lot of melee 0 gameplay for Borderlands 2. So now we're going to look at the next layout, which is bisected, diagonally from top left to bottom right. Obviously, one portion of the video, one half of the video is playing back at 60 FPS again, and another half at 30 FPS, again unlabeled for the time being. But this one should be very easy to tell the difference between, because at the dividing line, there's a simulated screen tear every other frame, because the 30F portion only updates half as often as the 60F portion. And because of that, we get that simulated screen tearing every time, and it's pretty easy to tell which portion is actually the 30 FPS. The higher FPS you have, the more fluid and smooth things will appear, up to a certain extent. Most displays only have a refresh rate of 60 Hertz, meaning they only refresh 60 times per second, and as a result, you will only see 60 frames per second on your display. Obviously, the top right was the one at 30 FPS, and the bottom left was the one at 60 FPS. There can still be some benefits, though, of getting a higher frame rate than what your monitor actually displays, but most of the time people generally only want as many frames as their monitor can actually push. So as we kill these guys here, be sure to check out the Torque Architect again, because with this particular viewing layout, it's very evident of the difference between, or very demonstrative of the difference between 60 and 30 FPS. Gonna go ahead and get down to this Torque Architect now, and we'll have one more viewing angle after we go ahead and kill the rest of these guys, and once again show my gear and skill build. It's very important that you show your gear and skill build, otherwise people will think you're cheating. I'm just kidding about that. It is a habit, though. Anywho, I'm gonna go ahead and finish these guys off. There are a lot of misconceptions out there about how frames per second actually works, or what it actually means. and what it means in relation to gaming. Some people actually think that the human eye can only see a certain amount of frames per second, and that number might be as low as 16 or 30 or even 24 or just great many of arbitrary numbers that rumors have been spread about. We're now at our third viewing layout, and you can see that I have taken the middle 50% of the video and slid it to the left on one side and to the right on the other side, with one being at 60 and another being at 30 FPS. Anywho, the stuff about the human eye only being able to see a certain amount of frames per second is entirely untrue. And I think Vsauce has actually made an excellent video that's very well made and well done. Obviously, he's a huge YouTuber, or they might be a channel collaboration of multiple people, I think. Anywho, their channel is very, very nice, and they have a video explaining how the human eye works that I will leave a link to in the description of this particular video that we're looking at now. And so if you're interested in seeing that, be sure to check it out. It's very well done. One of the benefits to having a higher frame rate than what you might actually find playable, because after a certain amount of frames, video begins to look like fluid motion. Begins to look like motion, I should say. And the more you have, the more it will actually look like motion. But if you have a really high frame rate and then you go into an inevitable FPS drop in a game, for example, Borderlands 2 has rather notorious FPS drops in the Washburn Refinery and other maps. And so if you went in there with a high, very playable frame rate, like 80 or something, and then got dropped down to something a little bit worse, like 40, well then it wouldn't be as terrible as if you were on a console already locked at 30 and then dropped down to like 15 or 12. And because of that, I'd probably recommend people get Borderlands, the pre-sequel, on the PC as opposed to the last generation of consoles. I do thank you guys very much for watching. I do appreciate it. If you haven't yet, please take the time to subscribe. I'd appreciate that as well. Otherwise, I do thank you guys very much for watching, and I hope to catch you next time. I also hope this video was very informative. One more time, thanks for watching, guys. Bye.